den mother know about this? If I were to ignore this infraction, I would certainly be remiss. You get my drift? This born-to-be-wild thing is making me nervous. I think you're doing your ancestors a disservice. Louis, do your classmates know about this? You're about 6 feet 5 inches from the abyss. This born-to-be-wild thing is technically creepy. On second thought, it's just making me sleepy. Louis, does your parole officer know about this? And did you have an accomplice? Yeah, that figures. This born-to-be-wild thing is really passé. I'm getting a little tired of hearing your girlfriend say, "Where did our love go?" Where did my shoes go?
Well, the boys in the band never took a shine to you, 'cause you don't understand even half of what you think you do. And the boys tell me I should take a breather, but the boys never did understand you either. Well, the girls in the know tell me that you're devious, and they don't understand why you're waiting for me on the bus. Well, you sure don't drive and you're no mechanic.
Greetings, colleagues across town and across the globe. It's the 30th of March in the year of our Lord 2023. I'm Paul Colby, your host for Paul Colby and the Investigators, which you see periodically here at Houston Media Source. As you can see, my investigators are nowhere to be found this evening, and that's because they are on assignment. Practically everybody in my organization is up to something, and they're just not available to come down here and join me on the air. But that doesn't mean that you won't hear from them, because you will. I took the liberty of taping my last conversations with several key investigators earlier in the week so that I could show you what sort of things they bring to my attention and where those things lead me when I do further research. You see what I'm saying? They give me the tips. I act on those tips to give you the stories of what is really going on behind the scenes. And we've been doing that for a long, long time now. 3 investigators will be available for you to see and hear. Well, I should say hear. One investigator is undercover and in fact in disguise, so you will only hear her voice. But let's start with a man who has a lot to say and who looks like he has a lot to say. I am talking about my colleague of many years, Hugh Dunnett. Let's see what you had to tell me earlier in the week.
My first investigator with me tonight is Hugh Dunnett, who you may or may not recognize, but I think you will recognize him if I say he is known as the Hair Force, because he is the Earth's leading authority on human hair. He's often referred to, like I say, as the Air Force. Now, he,
Air Force One.
yeah, Air Force One. He, as an offshoot of his expertise, he maintains several museums across the states. One, for example, in Duluth, is the Museum of Beetle Wigs. I guess these are obsolete now, right?
Oh, they're always on time, baby. They're always ready.
Okay.
Always ready to go, they are.
All right, but I know a lot of people have learned that if they don't cut their hair, it grows. So they technically don't need to build. Anyway, another a museum in Fresno is the Museum of Hair Dryers, and I understand one of the centerpieces there is a hair dryer that seems to be older than even ancient Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they knew how to get themselves blown away way back in the ancient times.
I see. That's. Did they already have electricity, or was this was it manually operated somehow, or?
Well, having the wheel, they were able to do a lot of rubbing things in their hair to generate some sort of a static that would send the energy through. They'd have a whole chain of people encircling one, and then they'd zap that person in order to get the hair just right.
I see. The other thing, a museum in Dallas, I have never been to this one. You have a collection of chest hair drawings. I guess these were popular in a different time and place. I mean, you don't see too many chest hair drawings today.
Well, I'm trying to bring it all back, baby. See, let me set the table for you, right? I believe in a follicular approach to pop culture, and with the Beatles. I reach across their entire repertoire, from bowl cuts to wingtips. I give tidbits and dating advice and even meal planning. I call it my diabetes treatment.
Okay, I think I understand that. But hair is not the only thing you do. I understand you are also the CEO of Tone Deaf Hiring. I guess you hire people for the wrong gigs. Is that the idea?
Yeah. See, listen now. I owe all of our success, I think, to our chief otolaryngological nasopharyngeal phlebotomist, Antonin Banderas. He recognizes that in the workplace, opposites attract. So if you need someone with green credentials, you find someone from China's Red Guard. You need a tuba player, we recommend you find a tin pianoist. You familiar with that?
Yeah. It sounds good.
Yeah, it's someone who plays the kettle drums just very quietly.
I see. Okay, I get it now. And I guess based on being sort of ambidextrous with respect to working opportunities, you also started the once popular, but now I guess it's mostly abandoned, the carbon dating site. It's currently being used, I think, to attract voters in certain elections, but
yeah. So I co-founded that with a few dinosaurs in the state capitol, but all too quickly, a clientele were dominated by fossils looking to grind. Try not to talk about that too much.
Okay, so that's in the past. But I know all of your life experiences formed the basis for this year's Oscar-winning, award-winning film, All Quiet Everywhere, Everything Except for Women Talking, and not including the Kitchen Fableman.
Yeah, well, hey, look, we already started preparing a sequel too. It's called Silence of the Limbs. We're interviewing men because they're unable to function in society because they lost the ability to manufacture burps and farts from their orifices and joints.
I see. Is it true that you are, for some reason, worried about all this news, this talk about Camp Jejun and problems?
Yes, sir. I am worried about the lack of scandals at Camp Jejun. Why aren't there more reports of untied shoelaces and coffee pots left on the stove too long? Why are things so calm there? I'm guessing it's something in the water. The government's trying to cover it up.
I can see that. I mean, I can hear that. I can imagine that. You now, in terms of working for me, your last assignment was to go have a look at the Monkey See Do caucus and the Monkey Do. Monkey See Pack and Monkey Do Pack. To me, they seem to be the same thing. But did you gain anything from that experience watching these people, performers?
Well, I think it's all about the Marjorie Taylor folks. Her lawyer and her, she's getting a divorce, right? So her lawyer and her family doctor put out this joint statement saying, in effect, no more Marjorie's jumping on the bed. Apparently, they've been down this road before because MTG has become synonymous with CTE.
CTE?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. And then I guess the former president was there. I guess he gave the not eulogy, closing speech, and he was talking about retribution. That's what you were telling me earlier. I'm not sure exactly what retribution is, but certainly it's in the past tense, right?
Yeah, no, when I wrote it up, I think I spelled it correctly. It was retrosputum.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote that down wrong. You have been spending some time lately in the Silicon Valley, right? And I guess it was sort of like a vacation for you, right?
Well, I don't know. I like to distinguish myself because the company was a little awkward, with the number of sperm banks failing in Silicon Valley because their members don't stand up for themselves. Anyway, I think our later viewers will tell you there's no such thing as too big to fail anymore.
When you were out there in the Silicon Valley, I understand that you got to meet some of your favorites, some members of the original cast of the TV hit series Star Tex, and these guys can engineer any kind of failure that they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're nice guys. Right?
Yeah, but I think I think all their good days of beaming here and beaming there, and that's all behind them.
And I will try to dig a little deeper so that we can expose what needs to be exposed for the people who, they rely on us to tell them the truth about what's going on behind the curtain.
Very well. See you soon.
Well, you heard it from the horse's mouth. I mean, figuratively. You heard it from Who Done It. Hugh done it. Yeah, Hugh done it. And he knows what he's talking about. It wasn't that long ago, folks, we were saying, ho, ho, ho. And now these days, what we're saying is, uh-oh. Anyway, about the things that Hugh was telling me and you. We talked a little bit about beetle wigs there, but after that conversation was not being taped, he shared with me something that absolutely blew my mind. I'm kidding you, of course. My mind is still here, and so is my hair. But what about some folks we know called the Beatles? Well, I'll tell you why we have beetle wigs in the first place. It's because, and I'm quoting here a controversial new book by Donald DeSantis and Chester Houlibaum, the Beatles were losing their hair. They were practically bald when they got their start. and they therefore had to have wigs so that they would, you know, if you look at early pictures of Liverpool and them performing, this is just an aside, you notice that there are no Gila monsters in that picture, right? You know why that is? Well, they don't have Gila monsters in Liverpool. They're mostly in West Texas. But anyway, I digress. The Beatles, apparently, John met Paul at some sort of secret meeting of hairless individuals, and Paul told him, I have a younger buddy. He's also losing his hair. We need to go find a doctor who can do something about this. Well, their friend, Pete Best, told them that there was a doctor in Hamburg, which is where, of course, you know that the hot dog was invented there, among other things. They went to Hamburg looking for a doctor. I think his name was, well, I forgot what his name was, but he had apparently no longer been doing hair interventions because he'd moved to Israel in 1948. So there you have it. Anyway, he also talked about the hairdryer at the museum. I had to go back and look at that again. It's kind of the crown jewel of the museum. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Rosetta Stone. She's looked at a lot of ancient relics. She tells me that this thing was actually invented by dinosaurs before they got, you know, hit by asteroids. And the ancient Egyptians found these dryers. They thought that they were somehow to be used for cooking. We know that that is not what they were to be used for. He talked also about illustrations of human chest hair. My favorite one is an illustration by Fran Tick. She's a popular sportscaster and artist, and she does a lot of really visual things. I think she's famous for a performance art piece that she did featuring Michelangelo's David. It was a hit on TikTok for a while, but I think it has been banned. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene came up. Of course, lots of Americans these days are getting a divorce from Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I'm going to tell you about a poll that I recently read. It's the Sardine Comfort Poll. What is most interesting here, yeah, you know, a lot of people would just say, I'm getting a divorce from Marjorie Taylor Greene because of irreconcilable differences. Well, okay. Now, for example, the biggest reason given was that she snores even while apparently awake. Now, I remember I used to teach a course in tortured syntax at Chasing the Westerns University, and I think my entire class there was snoring while pretending to be awake. But look at that second one. Can we have that slide one more time? It's saying she leaves uneaten shrimp tacos on the counter overnight. I guess you have friends that do that too, and I suppose you know how irritating that is. But not everybody is you know, dissing Marjorie Taylor Greene. Some people are big fans. In fact, she has a website, you know, Marge Leads the Charge, and on this website, she tells things to her supporters that don't even make it to the news. For example, I know that recently on her site, I was following this, she had a proposal to stop drag racing. And I think she misunderstood current events a little bit. You see, she thinks that a lot of people are racing to be in drag because they want to change their gender or something like that. Anyway, it makes sense to those people. It doesn't make sense to me. Now, Hugh spent some time. I asked him to go cover, you know, the Monkey See Pack, where the Republicans convened, mostly to hear big Donald Trump, who is now, you know, going to be indicted in New York. He is indicted. He's going to be charged in New York. I'll get back to that later. But some people went on the other coast to see Mr. DeSantis. And he has a book out right now called The Courage to Be Me. I understand it used to have a different title. The title used to be The Courage to Be Me, unless you are a serious investigative reporter, a black person wanting to know more about your history, or Mickey Mouse, or just a Democrat. But his publisher said that's too long a title, so it's just The Courage to Be Me. And it turns out a lot of people don't want to be Donald DeSantis. Can you imagine? Anyway, there is a lot of book burning going on in Florida right now, but Ron or Don, whoever he is, has promised that that's not going to be a problem because he's planning to write 200 more books. And so, you know, you have the argument, is it quality or quantity? They're going to have plenty of books in Florida, just things you might not want to read. Anyway, while investigating Republican politics, Hugh told me that there was a Republican plan to have a new court. It would be called the Court of Public Opinion. But some of the leaders in the Senate who are conservatives said, hey, that might be a bad idea, seeing as how most public opinion is against everything we Republicans are doing right now. I think that's kind of ironic, isn't it? Well, anyway, I also told Hugh to go down to Silicon Valley. That's where that groovy bank, you know, of the you know, the Star Tex, it went belly up, and naturally the Republicans blamed that on, guess what? Like they blame everything else on woke, you know, because broke is woke. I'm not sure I understand that, but you know what? Broke is woke makes me think, because this is involved in all of this censorship of books and things like that. For example, the story of Rip Van Winkle, you may remember that. It's now being regarded as woke, so they're rewriting it. Rip Van Winkle now is going to be a cross between a dinosaur and a bald musician, some guy who invented the egg beater. Isn't that amazing? Finally, Hugh made mention, I took some notes here, Hugh made mention of something in the water at Camp Jejun. You know, ever since he said that, I've been paying more attention to what's in the water when I see water. And all I can tell you is I'm seeing a hell of a lot of goldfish. I'm still working on that. I'm not sure why I see goldfish. Anyway, I certainly appreciate Hugh's tips on these matters, large and small. But I also got quite an education recently when I talked to another of my crack investigators, Catatonic. And you will notice here, I talked to Catatonic, but I didn't get to see her. Let's roll that for a minute.
My second guest investigator tonight is Catatonic. And you may know her as a historian who studies ancient Egypt, and also is an advocate for automobile safety. And this is why she is widely known for pioneering the use of crash test mummies. But she is also an expert on abnormal psychologists at the School of Bottom Feeders in Ventura, California. Have I got that right?
Okay, I have studied some abnormal psychologists. For example, Dempsey Fume, who always washed his dishes wearing a Speedo, and Frederick DePupa, who spent Christmas Eves, most of them, inventing self-hatred. But mostly, I have been interested in interesting groups.
Can you talk to us about some of those interesting groups?
Okay, for example, there is a group of college students at Not Tonight College of Arson who are obsessed with cramming people into a porta-can, seeing how many they can cram into a porta-can. And then there's another group of students at Missing Laptop University. It used to be people would be eating goldfish, but these students are being eaten by goldfish. And another interesting group is people with battery problems who punish themselves with guilt, but find it deeply satisfying.
On the political front, lately you've had a lot to say about the governor of Texas.
Yes, I started following him when I heard about the secret State of the State address, behind closed doors. But I was able to find the address online. And so I already knew before it was reported about the plan to take over the Houston School District. You see, the governor believes that educated students can be dangerous. And so he's going to create a board that has all officers coming from the school districts in Florida. So you can expect a few changes.
Now, you've also studied the crisis in the banking industry, have you not?
Well, I know about the problems in the banking sector, but I think most people have the wrong idea. You see, what happened is that a couple of banks collapsed, and I mean, it's an architectural problem, not a financial one. It was like the roofs caved in and there wasn't even a hurricane going on. You see what I mean?
Do you have anything to tell me about March Madness?
Well, I will say this about March Madness. Most people don't know yet that the final game is going to be played on the Supreme Court. Or maybe I should say at the Supreme Court. In other words, the Supreme Court has pretty much decided that regardless of what people think and believe, or, what the mood of the country is, that they get the final say in everything. So they get to say who wins and who loses.
I recently asked you to attend the Monkey CPAC and the Monkey DoPAC. I wonder if you have any takeaways that would be valuable to our audience.
Yes, I did attend the Right Wing Net Conference. I don't know what they call it exactly, but anyway, I did have some takeaways. First of all the speakers seem to have driver's licenses, which I guess is important if you're going to run the country and drive public opinion. And secondly, I thought there were loons of all generations represented. And I also thought, it's a very nice teleprompter, but there were some some new adjectives and adverbs used by the speakers this year.
So also, you've been watching a lot more Fox News lately. Am I right?
Well, yes, I have been watching Fox News of late and other broadcast platforms that are even further to the right. And I understand they are trying to reconfigure themselves because even people of a certain political persuasion just can't seem to digest what Carlson Tucker has been saying these days.
So what are some of these new programs?
Well, one of them is a weather program, but it's very local, so they cut away to local stations. But they always just say that we are going to have weather today, so I stopped watching that. It's kind of redundant. There is a program, Science with Carlson Tucker. And one of the things I enjoyed lately is the program Your Lawn is the Enemy, in which he talks about the dangers of letting your front yard and backyard do their own thing because they're probably out to get you. And then another one along the same lines, it's real late at night, Who Wants to Know It All? I've learned a lot from that program.
You know, sometimes I think that Catatonic knows it all. Maybe she should be on that show. Now, let me just, in passing, comment on a few things she says, and then I want to get down to nitty-gritty, you know. I think that's what she calls it from her professional viewpoint. She says that the banks are starting to collapse because of architectural problems, roofing. You know, a lot of people are spending more time on the roof lately, and I think that might have something to do with the collapse of buildings, you know. I think I'm going to write a book about it, or maybe a song. And she is also talking about the Supreme Court getting into the game, in this case, March Madness. But obviously, the Supreme Court is in the game for sure these days on more than one issue. So I'm not surprised that she says that. Now, and curiously, I can tell you something. She said she wouldn't be on this video with me because she was not only undercover, she was in disguise. She was in disguise as an animal of some sort, and she told me it was because she was going on some sort of big boat ride. But can you imagine that when I sent her to look at the Monkey See Pack conference, that she wasn't even considered abnormal when she went in disguised as an animal? Because I think what you're going to see in the next election is that all kinds of mammals and some reptiles will be considered voters. You know, they're already asked questions when we have polls about what people think and what animals think. But anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked too much. I have been very interested in these abnormal psychologists that Kat mentioned. Especially, I have been immersing myself in the work of Frederick de Pupa, especially that new book, Who Moved My Caboose? In fact, there's a trilogy of books. I haven't got to all of them. There's also Who Moved My Refrigerator and Who Moved My Major League Franchise. Interesting. I think also Donald Trump is just copying what he sees in, you know, on the bookshelves in the bookstores. His book, Who Moved My Cheeseburger? Anyway, we'll get back to Don in a minute, but what I want to tell you about Frederick DePupa. It's fascinating reading his book because he spends some time talking about people who spend hours drying their hair. Does that ring a bell for you? He also talks about people who have preferences for particular kinds of beans, people who remember bean dinners that were better than other bean dinners. And these would have to be people who who eat enough beans to qualify as an expert. Anyway, that new Trump book I mentioned, I am told that it was ghost-written by Lonesome Gov, who is the influential leader of rural Texas, and I'm told his books are now considered pornographic, but they are on a list of PG or mature audiences only, so if you live in Texas or Florida, you can still see those. Now, even though I find DePupa pretty amazing, the other abnormal psychologist that's listed in some of the new opinion pieces by Catatonic, that is Dempsey Fume. Now, his philosophy is just astounding. Some of what he says challenges conventional wisdom. One of the things is about beans. I have mentioned that both these psychologists or philosophers almost mention beans in different contexts. But what he is also saying is people, it turns out, prefer squalor to opulence for reasons that he doesn't really explain. Kat was talking about interesting groups, and I guess these are either the same as or different from interest groups, but one she mentioned was the pranksters who like to fill up a porta-can, stuff as many people as possible. I started noticing these things when I went out for my morning strolls. For example, here's a porta-can showing minimum occupancy of 48. That's a lot of people to cram into one of those. And then I went down to the beach the other day. I was seeing signs saying, "Danger goldfish." It didn't mention that people were being eaten by goldfish, but it did say danger. So what am I to say about that except that I am always having my eyes opened by my investigators who pay attention to little details that the rest of us skip. And since we're talking about details other people skip, she mentioned the new Science with Carlson Tucker show, so I've watched some of those. Here is one. You see the preview for it. This was about alien life in our neighborhoods. It was called They Don't Look Like Us. And I'll tell you what, this alien that is right there on a utility pole, I certainly wouldn't have known he was, or he or she or it was a living thing. No, until I took a closer look. And in the program, they explain, for example, what a fungler is. You know, they seem to have a fungler. They have a saswa, and they have an otis. Now, I had a girlfriend once who had an otis, but she didn't tell me anything about it until, we'd been dating for several years. Anyway, they also have what they call a peckboo. Now, and by the way, at the top, you see that 2002? Apparently, they give you a marker that says when they arrived here on Earth. But peckboos are interesting to me because you have heard Donald Trump say, if I get charged, there will be violence. You know what? If you look closely at some of the video and pictures of Donald lately, you will see what I think is a peckboo, which is where you would plug in a charger. And I think that's what the recently indicted president is talking about, is somebody charging him at his peckboo. Okay, I can't really explain it any better than I have already. But I also watched another series she mentioned, Carlton Tucker on science. And by the way, they have him talking about science because he can no longer be trusted to talk about, you know, politics, but something very important and something hard-nosed like science, he can talk about. And this program, Your Lawn is the Enemy, that really took me into a new dimension as I started watching all sorts of plant. Like I looked in the backyard, I saw grass growing where there hadn't been any the week before. And then more recently, I was going down to a grass station. And I was being followed by this thing right here that was pictured in that Science with Carlson Tucker segment. And this thing, I think, was looking over my shoulder trying to steal my ATM password. Maybe I'm just imagining things, but I certainly am paying more attention to the lawn that might be my enemy. And so for that reason, I'm glad that CAT is working for me and not some corporation that sells data about my favorite alternatives to cow milk or whatever. But another investigator that I'm pleased to have aboard is the sensitive and retiring industrialist Noah's Ark, with whom I spoke the other day. Let's roll Noah's segment here.
And my last investigator is Noah's Ark. You may have heard of Noah's Ark. In fact, I heard the other day that Noah's Ark was in jail for bracketeering. So I'm surprised I was able to get you on video here, Noah.
Well, actually, boss, that's a bit of a misconception. That was my brother. No offense.
Noah.
Now he does look somewhat like me, except his hair is shaved on one side and orange on the other. So I'm not quite sure why I think they just did that because it was easier for me to arrest him. And he wasn't in jail for racketeering. He was actually in jail for bracketeering. Yeah. Because of March Madness. Yeah, he actually picked the 16-1 and the 15-2 upsets. So that immediately drew suspicion on him that he was probably rigging those, because who could think Princeton could win a game in the NCAA tournament? Certainly I couldn't.
Exactly. Yeah. So you and Noah Fentz are pretty close?
No, actually he lives well, at times I think he lives in an alternate universe, but to be fair to him, and a lot of that has to do with the shaved hair. I think he's picking up radiation, but truthfully, he just lives in Montgomery County. That kind of set us apart.
I understand. Now, I also understand that currently you are a meatloaf namer.
That is in fact correct, boss. All my life I wondered why, you get nicknames for other food, like hot dogs are called tube steaks a lot, right? But meatloaf, and I really like meatloaf. Meatloaf never has a name, and so they just unknown meatloaf just really bothers me. So and it's actually become quite popular. I'm managing to make a slight living. People, I have a website now, nameyourmeatloaf.org, and people send in photos of their meatloaf, and I name it for them.
Well, now just a minute. I eat a lot of vegetables. Most of them are unnamed.
I give them, vegetables. Who really eats vegetables? There's something you consume would be about eating. To me is a pleasure. Vegetables are not. So I pretty much consume vegetables for the nutritional value.
Okay, so when you make a meatloaf, how do you know if it's a male or a female if you're going to give it a name?
Well, usually it's pretty evident if they're not, if it hasn't undergone gender affirming care, and in which case, what I do there is if it looks like it's either in need of gender affirming care or has received gender affirming care, I give it a neutral name. For instance, Stacy could be either a male or a female name, so I'll name it Stacy. Then I'll save the name like Big Hoss for the obviously male and Marilyn for the obviously female ones.
Okay. Another thing you do or you have done, I'm told you built the biggest boat that anybody has ever seen in history. I mean, I guess you were looking back to your ancestor, the original Noah, building a big boat.
Yeah, well, plus there was some. I may have misinterpreted what's a cubit. I tried to ask the Lord. It's supposed to be 40 cubits by 40 cubits, and I asked the Lord, what's a cubit? And the answer I thought he gave through his angel Gabriel was 6 acres. So I have roughly a several thousand acre boat that I built in the outskirts of Casper, Wyoming.
Casper, Wyoming. So you built this boat on land, and unlike the original ark with 2 of everything, I am told that you have 3 of everything.
Well, that's correct. In this day and age, you have to have a gender male, a gender female, and a non-binary. So I think it's only fair that we take 3 of everything.
And so
the Lions weren't too happy with that idea because the lion culture is a very macho-driven culture. So they want men to be men, lionesses to be lionesses, and they're not really comfortable with non-binary lions. But I persuaded them.
Did you have to build restrooms for everyone?
Yeah, they're all gender neutral, of course.
And cafeteria?
And actually, one entire, or actually, I think 3 or 4 cubits are actually closet space that are taken up with drag costumes. So it's quite a departure from the original boat.
Okay, so you built this thing in Casper, Wyoming. I've never seen any news story about it actually getting in the water. Am I missing something?
Well, tell you the truth, boss, it's never actually going to float, but I don't really care. It's frankly it's too big to sail. But the good part is you, the taxpayer, through the Federal Boat Insurance Company, is bailing me out. So I'm in fact going to make some cash on the deal, and I may turn it into a tourist attraction later.
Oh, that would be convenient since it has cafeterias already, and
right. We can do drag hour stories as well.
You have it well planned. I want to ask about March Madness. Now I understand, President Trump with the problems that he's been having. I understand he's appealed to his base for a new March Madness. I guess that would be some sort of a return to the beautiful days of tourists in DC.
What my brother, no offense, told me, boss, is that he's actually, the brackets now are going to be for each one of his potential indictments. You post Trump up against the potential indicter, to coin a phrase. And depending on whether he gets indicted or not, you extend. And at each stage of that, he, of course, raises money from the base.
So other Republicans, I understand it's so popular to appeal to the base that other Republicans are now claiming to have committed crimes or to have paid money to Stormy Daniels, etc., so that they can appeal to the base.
Yeah, I think that's true, boss. Of course, some of them aren't the brightest bulbs in the box. They should really, with the go big or go home, they should go with porn stars, and instead a lot of them are doing traffic tickets. But But fortunately for them, the base, they can tell the base that the traffic ticket costs several $100,000 and the base will pony up the money. So it's still in its early phases, but I think it's going to work out for them.
Okay, so Republicans are also trying to glom on to this March Madness phobia, and they're calling their presidential primary the Final Four. So I guess they're talking about Trump and DeSantis and Nikki Haley, and I don't know who the fourth would be.
I think that's going to be Stormy Daniels. She's, that will certainly liven up the debate, won't it?
It certainly would. Now, one last point. I have heard about an American drone being followed by some Russian jets who poured some sort of hot sauce on it and so forth. Do you know anything, the real story behind this drone warfare episode?
Yeah, kind of like the Trump rally where they sold all the tickets and to teenagers that had never had any addition. This is actually a TikTok. There's a TikTok video, and if you do the proper dance, it interferes with the signals to the drones. The drone actually failed because teenagers all over the world were doing the TikTok dance.
I gotcha.
This motion is very important. That's the motion that pushes the drone down.
Well, you would think it could also push a big boat out to sea, but maybe
for a future date we'll look at that.
And a final thought here. These bank failures that are going on, you told me that that's because of venture capitalists?
Yeah, that's true. They're surprisingly enough, they're making big inroads in England because England is known for its poor dental care. So now people are going in and they're actually using the national healthcare system in English to scam off of dental care. So they're calling themselves venture capitalists. But I think they really got in trouble because they had they started to accept the Swiss banks, not knowing any better, started to accept checks from Santos. So you can imagine those aren't even worth the paper they're printed on. So that was a problem. When you see George Santos writes you a check for several million, alarm bells ought to go off in your head. But
I guess unless you're a capital banker.
Yeah, well, they get their 1%, so they don't much care whether the bank stays in business or not. So, and certainly George Santos doesn't care about anything. So I do have a George Santos room reserved. One of the drag costume rooms on the boat is the George Santos room. He's welcome anytime.
Well, Noah, I want to thank you as always for this useful information that I'm going to use in further investigating all of these current issues. And I hope your brother stays out of jail for a while.
Yeah, dude, the legal bills are getting pretty onerous. So, but thank you, boss. Signing off.
First thing I want to tell you is this. I had not been in the habit of naming my meatloafs, but I do make a lot of bean casseroles, and I have noticed, for example, I had one named Herbert the other day. It tasted a lot better than the one named Sid. So I think there might be something to it. That's how the people who can grade their beans understand the naming process, even if I don't eat a lot of meat myself. But let's talk for just a minute about some of the things here that my friend Noah covered. First of all, he talked about his brother, Noah Fence, okay? I found out, I did a little research. It looks like Noah Fence got arrested in Florida because it's against the law to not vote Republican. That's one thing. Now, I was also curious to know how Noah's Ark was able to populate this giant boat. Well, I looked at another Science with Carlson Tucker episode. It was talking about the mystery of missing animals at a zoo. And that included, by the way, some woman disguised as an Otis warbler. And that's a species that was long thought to be extinct. But my point is, I think that could have been catatonic trying to sneak aboard the boat. I'm going to have to dig further and see why my investigators are keeping tabs with each other. I just don't get it. Now, you heard Noah talk about how the banks are being sloppy checking into certain deposits. I came across some pictures. This is this is what was tossed at the Silicon Valley, Bank. And look at that. You have a box of stuff from George Santos. Now, I learned two things. First of all, this is the mechanical goldfish that well, we managed to get one. That's what they're talking about. They invested heavily in these, and apparently all their deposits were hush money. And you can see where that would get you in trouble, relying on hush money. Now, the banks, of course, try to keep on top of things by using a guess test. They try to guess what investments are going to work out and not. Now, I know they invented something. The people at the Fungler Design Group invented a diaper to put over Michelangelo's private parts because some backwoods persons in some political party didn't want their kids to see a naked man. Well, it turns out they made millions of these diapers, but there's only one David by Michelangelo, so now they have a bunch of overstock. I mean, what are you going to do with all these diapers? I have seen some video lately showing these people going through museums all around the country trying to figure out what they can cover up. Let me tell you another thing. Trump is banking on being indicted, helping him out in the campaign. So as we pointed out, and as Noah says, a lot of your Republicans are pretending to be guilty of things. And a lot of middle Americans, taking a hint from Trump, are saying that they've overstated the value of some of their vacation properties. I don't have a vacation property myself, but there's a scandal involving some of the expenses, and that's from a company, Move That Hair to the Top. You see this? This is a company called Hair Apparent, and we have an invoice. We've got an invoice showing that Trump spent $33,000 on a hair-raising experience. The Trump arrest, that's forthcoming, but we've talked about TikTok and people doing all sorts of pranks using TikTok. There are already pictures of the president's arrest, and he hasn't been arrested yet. Who's responsible? Well, probably the same people that dumped hot sauce on a drone. And finally, I want to tell you, we hear a lot about the brackets here because of the Final Four. We hear a lot about artificial intelligence, but look at this. Artificial intelligence doesn't understand all of our sporting events. According to artificial intelligence, the Final Four this year had a contest between Tom Brady and Don DeSantis, which was won by Tom Brady, and another round with Stormy Daniels going up against James LeBron. James LeBron? Well, that sounds curious. In any case, we don't know who won, but that's who artificial intelligence says is going to make it to the Final Four. We don't have to wait very much longer to find out, do we? Because that's going to be right here in Houston right now. I want to just leave you with a thought. Public access TV came into being about 50 years ago. You know, you have your public TV, your government TV, and your education. And a lot of places that have public access television have some high-quality shows like this one. This one has been a home base for me and the investigators for a long time, but we're not going to be here much longer well, we're not going to be here anymore. So you're going to have to go look for us online, where all of the captivating intelligence seems to be these days, because, well, I wish it were on TV and I wish we could stay here, but apparently Houston Media Source doesn't have room for a show like this. So all I'm telling you is, me and the investigators have had a great time coming to you from this platform for more than a decade, and my investigators for more than a couple of years joining me here. So we hope you'll be all right, and we hope you'll look us up and follow our specials wherever they're shown, wherever they're heard, wherever people try to cover them up, because we're on the job.
Something calling, I don't want to go. I don't know why, I don't want to know. Whatever it is coming after me. It's in color, it's in stereo, and it's in 3D. I feel it in the depths of my soul. It comes over me and I lose control. I wake up in a brand new black hole. Here we go again. I feel it suck me in. My head begins to spin.